right, so welcome back, everyone. So we do have with us this morning political leader of Hope, Timothy Hamel-Smith, who joins us now to tell us what are his party's expectations for today's budget presentation. Mr. Hamel-Smith, good morning.
Good morning to you and to all your viewers this morning.
Yes, thank you very much, as always, Mr. Hamel-Smith. Yeah, thank you for joining us this morning. Well, as we await the Finance Minister's budget presentation a little later, do you have any concerns at all? Is there anything you'd like to see during his presentation?
Well, certainly, absolutely. Given the present condition in the country,
yes,
I think that of major importance, beyond the bookkeeping exercise of the budget, I think crime and corruption have to be one of the areas that the government tackle. They need to introduce major items in order to stem the flow of guns and drugs into the country, of course, which are being used for criminal acts and murder and house breaking, house invasion. You know, the primary duty of any government is the safety and security of its people. And therefore, if you haven't achieved that, that has to be the major focus today. And until we get that, under control, then the question arises as to who is in control. And right now, one gets a sense that the criminals, the gangs are in control, as opposed to the government and the government's armed forces, the police. And we need to do something dramatically different than we'll be doing now.
Yeah, and I suspect, Mr. Hamel-Smith, that we are going to see an injection of billions of dollars again to deal with crime in Trinidad and Tobago. We have seen it over the years, but as I always say, and I'm sure that you may agree, we have not gotten the desired results.
Well, truly, throwing dollars at it is not the answer. It is to find the interventions which will make a difference. And therefore, if you just say you've increased the budget of the Minister of National Security by X billion dollars, that matters not to the public. It's of no concern whatever that figure is. What will you do with the money? How will that achieve a transformation of the security that people long for? And of course, the problem, why I put that first, is in fact nothing else happens. We can achieve nothing unless we get a hold on crime and corruption. So they have to be, to my mind, the primary target. If we get that under control, the other things will work. But nothing works unless we get that crime and control. Crime and corruption.
Are you optimistic about the upcoming talks between the government and the opposition, anti-crime talks?
Do you have a date as yet?
It's going to be right after the budget debate after the budget is passed.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing what has to be said. I don't discount that they may bring to the table something new, something that is workable. But I have my doubts. None of these talks, it's political grand charge by both sides, and none of them has resulted in anything that is of substance that has made a difference. We've fed egos. We've managed to make a lot of kankata, and no doubt it's a political fight, as it were, to see who we could make look bad and who did what. And
so you don't feel it's going to be different this time around, because we have heard from the both parties who are expected to be a part of these talks, we have heard this talk from them that things are going to be different this time around. We are going to be practicing this type of maturity that is needed, and it's about the country and it's about service.
Yeah, so they may come, I'll be happy to know that they've come to the table with goodwill and the people, the business of the people at heart. The question is, the goodwill is not enough unless you bring some initiatives which will produce benefits in the long run. So at this point, I don't know what either side intend to submit, but I look forward to that occasion.
Yes.
I look forward to the occasion, perhaps the other parties outside of those who are in the parliament will have that opportunity to lend their voice if, in fact, what emerges is nothing of consequence.
Yes. Mr. Hamel-Smith.
I think you need as many voices focused on the solutions to this problem.
Well, I know that
and I don't think it's a time when the whole country needs to come together and tackle this problem, which will, is threatening to bring the country to its knees.
Well, I know that other organizations have expressed the view that they should have some input, but I suspect the main political parties, they have to decide how that input is going to happen and if it's going to be all a part of the initial talk. So we'll see how that goes. But I know, sir, that you have some other concerns. Read the budget presentation this afternoon.
Well, certainly, foreign exchange is at the top of the mind of many people today. Both the individual citizen who finds himself unable to access foreign exchange and businesses to do business. So that I expect that there will need to be a focus on creating export industries that allow for earning a foreign exchange across the board, and the government needs to incentivize that. I think, for instance, the trade zones that they've created is a good start. The problem, that you tend to see in these things is it gets tied up in red tape and bureaucracy, and that is an essential component in making a zone like that work. So you want a zone both for local people to carry on business, but also to attract foreign investment, which will mean an inflow of foreign exchange into the country, and hopefully the manufacturing and export of both products and services, which would make a difference. No longer, I think everybody at this stage recognizes we can no longer rely on oil and gas to provide the resources that we need, the entire resources. Oil and gas will be there for many years, and we need to get as much as we can out of it. But I don't think that relying as we have on a one horse in this race to benefit the country, to grow the economy, continues to make sense. And we need to diversify and find other streams of foreign exchange, whereby the people will be able to feed themselves at the very minimum, but also to thrive and to be a thriving nation that allows prosperity to spread, throughout the nation, instead of having what we're having right now, where the middle class is shrinking, and of course under the middle class is even getting worse.
And talking about feeding themselves, as you put it just now, sir, in recent days there has been this discussion, and as today came up to yesterday, there was this discussion concerning the minimum wage, and some persons have spoken about a minimum wage of $19.50 to $30 and $25 and $40. Does your party, or do you have a position on increasing the minimum wage?
No, I certainly think that we need to have a living wage across the nation. And, to my mind, it's not simply a question of increasing the minimum wage. It is a question of bringing into that mix the question of productivity. So if, in fact, productivity is increased, and therefore you pay for performance, if you could introduce that element, then in fact everyone benefits. The wage earner will get more wages, and on the flip side of that, there will be more productivity. I would think that any initiative to increase the minimum wage or to incorporate with it, and of course one would have to tailor it according to the industry in which it is. We can't remain lacking in productivity the way we are and yet expect to expand salaries. One requires the other if the economy is to really work and all of us have that opportunity to enjoy the benefit of a better lifestyle.
Yeah. Mr. Hamel-Smith, what are some of the other concerns that are there to you?
Well, certainly we need to grow the economy. I mean, agriculture and agro-business have virtually been abandoned, and we need to incentivize that, both for local consumption and for foreign export. And there are areas of agriculture that can be fostered, make a big difference in the country in terms of employment, in terms of earnings, in terms of feeding ourselves, and in terms of earning foreign exchange. And I think the government, one of the things we've failed to do is to zone the country. And therefore, if you fail to zone the country, then what happens? Everybody just picks a spot and let me grow something here. And that's very unfortunate. We need to zone the country to agricultural zones, residential zones, commercial zones, industrial zones. And that shouldn't be difficult in today's age with the technology we have, with drones. You need to have that and then grant people security of tenure. You can't ask somebody to put down crops or to have long-term crops in particular and find that they can't rely on having a lease or some sort of security of tenure that will allow them to both recoup their expenditure and also derive benefit, and all of us benefit from it. And I think that's part of what the government need to be involved in. The government has, massive land holdings that they need to be made available, but made to, again, you need to simplify the terms. The mechanisms for persons to benefit from agricultural lots needs to be simplified. We tie this up in red tape and bureaucracy, so it may take a minimum of 3 years, maybe 6 years, 7 years before someone gets a lease, if you get it at all. This should not take more than 3 months. And we have to create those mechanisms that allow for that. And therefore, yes, I see agriculture being a big part, playing a big part in turning around our fortunes. But yes, we need to look at tourism, for instance, and they're focused tourism, not just, if you just have sun, sea, and sand, you're throwing your net very wide globally. But if you had focused tourism, medical tourism, eco-tourism, education tourism, and festival tourism, then in fact there are markets that you could zero in on in order to attract that tourist potential. And therefore we need to build the facilities to welcome and attract tourists into the country. Again, of course, crime and corruption remain a problem, a stumbling block and an obstacle to really getting to maximize your potential in the tourism industry.
But Mr. Hamel-Smith, what in your mind, this is maybe the second or third time you've spoken about crime and corruption in Trinidad and Tobago, but what in your mind do you see as the stumbling blocks in the way of really addressing it and stamping those problems out?
So there are a number of levels at which you have to attack this. I mean, we don't manufacture guns, so the guns are coming from outside. The narcotics and drugs are coming from outside, and therefore coming by ship, more or less. And therefore we have to have our waters policed. I don't think it hasn't worked. all the vessels that we have not made one iota of difference, or if so, of very insignificant opportunities. We need to work. CARICOM has set up impacts, which works with Interpol and the international allies that, and therefore it's a question of, shipping issues. And if you make it more and more difficult for people to enter, for guns and drugs to enter Trinidad and Tobago, then those who want to export it from wherever it is in South America will choose a different route. But we open our arms. That's literally what we do. We open our arms and welcome guns and ammunition. And that is really tragic that we haven't done anything. At one time we had talked about a ship rider agreement. We need to consider having ship rider agreements, the impact initiative coming out of Barbados, based in Barbados. And so you need to stem that flow. You also need to there are scanners nowadays, mobile scanners, that can tackle 150 containers in 1 hour. So there's nothing, and of course you can have them manned, because, from time to time you've heard that when we talked about scanners, people argue that, we might suffer some illness from it. Well, then bring in those people that are willing and capable and have the experience of manning scanners, so that we don't inhibit business, but we ensure that illicit goods do not enter the country.
Yeah. Mr. Hamel-Smith, we just have about 1 minute again. Anything else you'd like to share with us before you leave us this morning?
Well, education, I think, the fact is that I talked about attacking crime and corruption, and you need to do that with new initiatives. But you're going to continue to have generation after generation more gangs and criminals arising unless you fix the education system. And therefore the education system is at the heart, if you like, of what the government needs to do on a long-term basis to make sure that we have a better citizen coming out from the education system. We need to bring in character education. We need to bring in both technical and vocational education alongside the academic education. I think that we need to have community service. I think our students above a certain age ought to be required to perform community service with an NGO for a number of hours every year. In order to go up to the next grade. We need, it's giving back to the country. That's what you're starting to see. And finally, we need, in fact, to even go beyond what we've done. And we need nursery schools in the depressed areas. We need the government to fund that, perhaps our churches. Our churches have the greatest network of mosques, temples, churches throughout the country.
Yes.
And if in fact we could encourage them to start up nurseries, then in fact that is the advantage that people who can afford it have. Yes. And we need everybody to have that advantage.
Mr. Hamel-Smith.
If you miss those first 3 years, you've gone.
Mr. Hamel-Smith, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for speaking with us this morning, sir.
Thank you, and thank you to all your listeners and guests and viewers this morning.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye for now. All right, so we are going to a very short break, but before we do that, I have to remind you that you're calling us on 623-1711. The extension is 1995. We are taking your calls. You can call us after and tell us what you want to see in the budget. You want more money? Is that what you want? I know, they want more money. I hear in $19.50, I hear in $25, $30, $40. We're coming back with your calls.